Hello, everyone. So we have a big update with the Russiagate story. The Mueller report is supposedly complete, and there was no finding of collusion with Russia, and there will be no more indictments. The report does say, however, that Russia tried to interfere with the election and recruit people from the Trump team. Attorney General William Barr is in the middle of all this. He's kind of been um, the bridge, if you will, between Mueller and the public. Mueller basically sent the report to the Attorney General William Barr and read over it in 48 hours' time and came out with the announcement and sent a letter to Congress saying that there was no collusion. However, it does say that, and we'll read from the New York Times to get a more detailed picture, but it does say in the letter that Trump is not exonerated, so it doesn't reach a conclusion on the issue of obstruction of justice. Well, William Barr said that there's no evidence for that, and we'll get into all that. So basically, Mueller didn't reach a conclusion when it comes to obstruction of justice, and so he left that up to William Barr. So let's read from the New York Times. This is just 3 paragraphs here. The investigation led by Robert S. Mueller III found no evidence that President Trump or any of his aides coordinated with the Russian government's 2016 election interference, according to a summary of the special counsel's key findings made public on Sunday by Attorney General William P. Barr. Mr. Mueller, who spent nearly 2 years investigating Moscow's determined effort to sabotage the last presidential election, found no conspiracy despite multiple offers from Russian-affiliated individuals to assist the Trump campaign, Mr. Barr wrote in a letter to lawmakers. Mr. Mueller's team drew no conclusions about whether Mr. Trump illegally obstructed justice, Mr. Barr said, so he made his own decision. The Attorney General and his deputy, Rod J. Rosenstein, determined that the special counsel's investigators had insufficient evidence to establish that the president committed that offense. So, this is very interesting. So my initial reaction, let me put it in that perspective for a second. See, I'm not that all surprised that there was no finding of collusion between Trump and Russia. I didn't think it happened to begin with. I mean, there was a lot of shady things, for sure. But at the end of the day, you have Trump during the election. There's that famous video of him imploring Russia to find the missing emails, imploring not WikiLeaks. He implored Russia to find it because that was the whole angle, is that Russia is hacking everyone. So he publicly implored Russia to find the missing emails. Now, you have to think, and there, when you go through all these theories about the connections here between Trump and Russia, this is all, they make it look like it's all been a long time coming, to a certain degree, for years, and there's been this relationship, and they even took, the Trump Tower in Moscow, which didn't actually pan out anyways. But the point being, if you're actually behind the scenes with Russia in a shady way, you wouldn't have, announced in such a public way like Trump did. And on one hand, maybe Trump is kind of dumb, and I tend to think that, I go back and forth. Trump will do things that show that he's kind of stupid, but then there's other points where I think he comes out on top, and in this instance, he came out on top. I mean, this is undoubtedly a win for Trump, and we'll get into all that. But at the end of the day, I don't think Trump is that dumb. And if we're assuming that there was a shady connection between Trump and Russia, and there was this collusion narrative, he wouldn't have done that. He wouldn't have done that public request of Russia to find the missing emails. It just doesn't really make much sense. And then you talk about the fact that Trump's policies towards Russia are pretty. They don't line up with Russian interests a lot of the time. You know, between the sanctions, between what he's been doing in Syria. I mean, he's been saying we're going to draw it down, but it looks like we're not even necessarily doing that. And in fact, he's giving away the Golan Heights, a part of Syria, to Israel, and he did that via tweet. And Syria is one of Russia's allies. He's arming rebels in Ukraine that are, you know, against Russia. So, you know, we could go down the list. And if he's a puppet, like, that's not what a puppet does. A puppet, this whole idea is supposed to be Trump is doing Putin's bidding. And, I mean, like, there's, what examples are there of that? He's undermined our global leadership, if you will, or whatnot, and like he sowed distrust with our European allies. Well, as I've always said, I think that's because Trump is, you know, buffoonish. He says and does things that are reckless, and he's not aware of the consequences. So this idea that he's just doing that because he's in Putin's pocket, I don't buy that. You're not connecting the dots there. I think it's just because Trump is a crass person, and that's why those things happen. So I was saying how I'm not surprised that there's no finding of collusion, because I didn't buy into that narrative to begin with. But am I surprised that Mueller actually didn't find anything, and this is, you know, the way it's unfolding? I am a little bit surprised, because I anticipated that Mueller was going to come out with something that, you know, this charge against Trump that was going to be like, you know, leaps and bounds, like trying to jump to conclusions and tie Trump to Putin. I was expecting some kind of, you know, manufactured way that he was going to tie this up and make it, you know, look like the narrative that we'd been fed for so long. And not that was coming from Mueller, because Mueller was doing the investigating, the media was doing that, and we can talk about the media in a sec. But you know, because Mueller to me is just part of the establishment. I have no misconceptions about the guy. I don't think he's a hero, and you know, it's so funny because people on the left, well, you know, the mainstream left, if you will, because I think true leftists have looked at this investigation with open eyes and understand what it's really about and all that. But people in the mainstream left, they idolized Mueller, and you know, it just backfired for them. They're like, oh, he's this big hero. It's Mueller time. Yeah, well, it didn't work out for you, did it? So yeah, I'm surprised that it unfolded in this way. And so, you know, I can't help but wonder if there's more to this. You know, Mueller, for one thing, seems to be a pretty calculated guy. And he has a lot of resources at his disposal. This investigation cost something like $25 million. He had a team of 19 lawyers. And on top of that, I mean, let's talk about the fact that there was no finding of collusion between Trump and Russia or Trump's team in Russia, but they were able to get people locked up for crimes that were unrelated to like a Trump-Russia story. That they were able to get Paul Manafort. They got Roger Stone now, and others. They got Larry Cohen as well. So it's not as if this investigation yielded nothing. I don't have the exact numbers, but something like 7 people are convicted, and then from there, you know, the numbers show for themselves that there was things to be reaped from this investigation. But, you know, the Democrats are going to keep pushing for this full release of the report, and for Barr to testify to Congress under oath. Now, I mean, I'm for the full release of the report. They'll inevitably say, like, oh, we can't do that because there's classified information in there. Or I believe I read Barr said that anything that appears before a grand jury can't be released according to the law. So I don't know the specifics there. I want the full release of the report just because I'm for transparency. And do I think we'll get that? I think it seems unlikely to me that they would release a report of this nature that's so far-reaching. I mean, the thing's 1,000 pages. It doesn't strike me as that likely that they're not going to redact anything and they're just going to give you 100% of what's in it. I don't necessarily think that'll happen. But there will probably be more to be released of it. And I think I read that there's this public version in the works. So, at the end of the day, my hope is that this Putin puppet narrative will die. But I don't necessarily think it will. I think a lot of people are just grasping onto this narrative and trying to still push it even though it makes no sense. I mean, at this point, we have to operate under the assumption that there's no evidence. So let me talk about this angle for a sec. I'm not believing William Barr at his word. Barr has shown himself to be a questionable character. He supposedly said that the president can't be guilty of obstruction of justice, which seems crazy to me. But the fact that he's an official and acting in this official capacity, we have to take this as a Trump win. There's, because I'm for being objective. I don't want to say that Trump gets a victory here, but the fact is he did get a victory. He's going to be able to go out on the campaign stage and say, look, there was no finding of collusion. This was a biased investigation, what have you. He'll spin it however way he wants. But now there's a lot more truth to what he's saying in that regard, because there was no finding of collusion and no evidence of that, at least. So we have to operate under evidence. I'm 100% for only operating on the facts and evidence and policies, because I think the left can win just on that alone. So on the question of obstruction of justice, it seems odd to me. I mean, ultimately at the end of the day, the reason why it's hard to prove that is because you need to prove corrupt intent. And with Trump, he really, I mean, he's, I think it's because of his personality that he gets away with it, because we already know that he's kind of this crazy character that shoots from the hip and says pretty much anything. I mean, I think to a degree he's probably scripted, but there's certainly times when he kind of acts on his own, and we know this because his staff freaks out a lot of the time when he tweets something. But so when he was on Lester Holt's show, is he on MSNBC? I have no idea, but he was on TV. Trump, I think in 2017, it would have been around when he fired Comey, and he said that he was thinking about the Russia investigation when he fired Comey. And yeah, I mean, common sense would dictate that seems like obstruction of justice, because he said right there, I'm thinking about Russia when I fired Comey, so that must mean that he's trying to stop the investigation. But the thing is this, it's going to come down to what holds up in court, and you really can spin this however way you want, especially with the lack of evidence, and it's just hard to prove the corrupt intent. You would need something like basically a recording of Trump specifically saying, I need to fire Comey to stop this investigation. That's basically the bar that you'd have to reach. And when it comes to the issues of corruption and financial crimes, there was really no mention of that in the news at all. From what I'm sure there's got to be something in the report that's covering this, but people haven't been talking about that in the mainstream media. I wonder why, because probably our system is corrupt by nature, and this is normal politics. But what's going to happen in that regard? So I watch Secular Talk, Kyle Kalinski's show, and he was pretty vindicated when it came to this, because he's been saying for a long time that there was no collusion, and I tended to agree for the most part. And so what he said in regards to that issue of corruption and financial crimes is he's held for some time now that when Trump leaves office, he's going to be indicted probably by this, I think, the Southern District of New York court. I'm not sure exactly what the name is, but it's under that jurisdiction his financial crimes would be. And so they'll indict him once he's out of office. And I tend to agree with that. I mean, at least I would hope that they're going to try to go after him for financial crimes, because we know that this is the case. We know throughout Trump's entire history he's been guilty of tax avoidance, scams, frauds, and as well as the case for emoluments. He's for those who don't know, the emoluments clause means that the president can't accept gifts from a foreign country. And the Saudi prince, when he came to Washington, D.C., he paid $270,000 to stay in Trump's hotel. And yeah, you can chalk it up to, these elites, they spend more money than they know what to do with and all that, but it was a bribe. It was because Trump is the kind of person, like a lot of people would be like, oh, he's this billionaire, but he's actually pretty in debt. So he'll take any money. He'll take $270,000. Trump loves that. And in return, all he has to do is sign a weapons deal for Saudi Arabia, $100 billion. So to some degree, I wonder if they're actually going to go after the financial crimes, because it just seems like this is the commonplace thing about our politics. If you're rich enough, if you have the resources, meaning the lawyers, to fight your case for you, you can pretty much get away with anything. And I wonder if that'll be the case. And also the aspect of, well, there's probably a lot of people that have done the things Trump has done, and so we're going after him just because, well, he's the president, he's this notorious guy. But I mean, it's well reported in the New York Times. His family set up all these. Trump's dad, like he got his son rich because of these what you call tax. I forgot what it's called. Like he basically got him all this money through scams. And yeah, you could say that's Trump's family, but we know Trump himself has been guilty of things. So yeah, in the end, I don't find all this that surprising. I just hope that we're going to not lose sight of the corruption angle, and we're going to keep going down that angle, like I've said. And the Democrats, I mean, they're looking like they have the exact wrong reaction when it comes to this, and not surprising. I saw on the TV they're looking to, push forward with their own investigation. Like, what are you doing, Democrats? Like, Robert Mueller, like I just said, had a $25 million budget, 19 lawyers, so on and so forth, investigated for 2 years, and what, you think Democratic Congress people are going to, they're going to be the ones to crack the case? No, stop. What you need to do Democrats, is you need to craft a vision, a left vision for the country, and unify the party behind that. And of course, they'll never do that. The centrists, at least, are not going to give up without a fight. But and we want tensions to cool down between U.S. and Russia, and that's, this whole investigation has been politicized and weaponized by the mainstream left to fearmonger about Russia. And I'll talk about these points all day long. That there was a strategist, a Democratic strategist, that said on TV we should be bombing the Kremlin. Like, this is just wanton craziness. This should not be acceptable in our public discourse. I mean, I don't care what you think Putin or Russia is guilty of. It would be the equivalent of saying we interfered in North Korea somehow, and so Kim Jong-un is going to bomb the White House in response. Like, this is ridiculous talk. So I want the left to get really serious on this and be nuanced about it and not fall into this fringe narrative that Trump has to be a Putin puppet. Especially since now you're on the losing end of things. You don't have an advantage anymore because we can't be like, oh, well, we'll wait for Mueller to be done when he's done now, apparently. Does he have a trick up his sleeve? I don't know. But I'll say this, and this is an important point. For everyone out there who is naysaying this whole thing and is basically like, oh, well, William Barr, he's saying that there's no collusion or anything like that, but of course, in the Mueller report, there's got to be something in there that actually shows collusion. Like Mueller, of course he knows what's really going on, right? Well, I find it very hard to believe that if that was the case, if William Barr goes out there in public like he has and is like there's no collusion between Russia and he's stating all these things, if that's not what Mueller thinks and that's not what's in the Mueller report, he would come out and say this is a mischaracterization of what the report is and what my findings are. But he hasn't done that. I mean, it only makes perfect sense to do that. So I would be even more surprised if Mueller had this trick up his sleeve, but honestly, at this point, I don't think he does. I think he's probably waiting for Trump to leave office, and like I said, he's going to be hit with an indictment for his financial crimes. But I think we need to let this Russiagate narrative go. It does us no good. It has no value. Because we're dead set on trying to focus on Russia interfering in the 2016 election and just trying to keep reliving this over and over. I mean, people that are in the Hillary camp, I think they accuse the Bernie camp of trying to rehash the 2016 election because we dare stand for a leftist candidate. Well, they're actually stuck in the past because they're trying to invalidate the whole thing by saying, oh, it's Russia's fault that Trump is president. This is complete nonsense. Hillary lost. She, and I've gone into detail on this. I don't need to go over it again. But at the end of the day, look, Russiagate, I think, has to be over. At least, no, just over. It just needs to be over, in my opinion, because it does us no good. There's no evidence for it. And look, I'll say this. We need to abandon it. If there's some kind of finding that comes out later, whatever, I'll look at it. But we need to, right now, be focused on 2020, creating a left vision that people are going to get behind, and they will get behind. The poll numbers show that. and talk about corruption. Let's talk about, the real conspiracies about Trump, if you will, the real scandals. Because this scandal of Russiagate is now so devoid of evidence, you're akin to Alex Jones by trying to harp away on it still. So, yeah, at the end of the day, I think focus on the real issues of money and politics and corruption and creating a left vision. But the reason why I don't think the Democrats will do that, the centrists won't give up without a fight, is because they want to preserve the system the way it is.